Hello, and welcome to Cinematic Discomfort, disturbing films dissected through human experience, the podcast where we discuss the movies that challenge us and why. If you're new here, don't worry, so am I. Get comfy and we'll navigate this gooey philosophical mess together. I'm your host, Charlotte, and I'm here to be your guide to help you navigate through the difficult and complicated emotions brought up by quote-unquote disturbing movies. The worst thing a movie can do is be boring, so I want to talk about the ones that we can't quite shake. Art isn't always pretty. Sometimes the whole point is to make you uncomfortable and make you question things. What we're here to do is underline those questions and see if the answers we come up with can help us learn more about ourselves and the world around us. We do body horror, we do romance, we do allegory, and we do personal revelations. Today's cinematic discomfort is one of those rare cases where you think you know what you're getting. Science fiction, transformation, Jeff Goldblum being Jeff Goldblum, and then by the end you're emotionally wrecked and uncomfortable in your own body. That's right, today we're talking about the 1986 film The Fly, David Cronenberg's remake of the 1958 creature feature classic. A film that asks, what's the worst that could happen if you forget to check your code for bugs? Cronenberg takes the idea of the original film so much deeper, mixing grotesque body horror with one of the most heartbreaking love stories in horror cinema, in my opinion. It's basically the world's most elaborate PSA for closing the screen door, or, depending on how you look at it, a really expensive lesson in why men shouldn't be allowed unsupervised near lab equipment. The Fly is a big deal movie. I'm betting most of you have seen it at some point. It was made on a $15 million budget and grossed over $60 million worldwide. It's part of the reason for Cronenberg's reputation as being the master of body horror, and it has some of the most amazing and disgusting practical effects I've ever seen in a movie. The 80s were such a great time for practical effects, and this movie pulls out all the stops. Chris Wallace won an Oscar for Best Makeup on this movie, and he absolutely deserved it. If you're unfamiliar, The Fly stars Jeff Goldblum as scientist Seth Brundle, eccentric, brilliant, and as it turns out, maker of bad decisions. And Gina Davis as smoking hot journalist Veronica, or Ronnie, who falls for him and ends up having a front row seat for his spectacular and unfortunately literal meltdown. You can really feel that chemistry between them. It's all fun and flirty until your boyfriend starts storing his teeth in the medicine cabinet. On paper, The Fly is a science fiction horror about a teleportation experiment gone wrong. In practice, it's a slow-motion tragedy about the fragility of the human body, the terror of disease, and the ways that love and disgust can occupy the same space. It's also, weirdly, one of the most romantic movies I've ever seen that features projectile vomiting, which I think is a subgenre that deserves more recognition. Please leave your suggestions in the comments. It's a movie that's been analyzed as an allegory for AIDS, addiction, aging, and disability. It's a movie that speaks very frankly about decay. And that's why it fits right in here on our show. It's not just disturbing because it's gross, it's disturbing because it's honest. But yes, it's also very gross. I cannot understate the amount of oozing fluids in this film. Every few minutes you'll find yourself involuntarily saying, "Oh no!" like you've just seen someone drop a lasagna on the floor. Later, we'll check in with my good friend Antonio, whom I invited to talk about this movie with me so we could take a deep dive into the idea of body horror in general, and Seth's transformation as an allegory for illness, disease, and disability. We unpack Cronenberg's tragic love story, talk about the philosophy of the flesh, the horror of transformation, and why you should always be aware of the location of pesky insects in your surroundings. Because nothing kills the mood like realizing your molecules are now 50% household pest. Content warnings for this episode are going to be mostly around really gross body stuff, fluids, bodies falling apart, and also discussions of AIDS, death, euthanasia, and reproductive rights. If those aren't safe topics for you, feel free to give this episode a pass, and hopefully we'll see you in the next one. If you're sticking around, maybe skip the snacks this time unless you've got a pretty strong stomach. And if you listened to our last episode about Lamb, this episode is funnier because I both like and enjoy this film. No offense to Lamb, but there's less for me to yell about in this one. Alright, roll the tape. I honestly don't remember the first time I saw this movie. I don't know if I was a child, but I was probably a young teen at least. I'm pretty sure it would have been on VHS. I have a real respect for well-done practical effects, or honestly even poorly done ones, so this movie is up there with Hellraiser for me in that respect, and that's one of my favorite movies of all time. But it's definitely one of those things that sat differently with me as I've gotten older, and I've been able to kind of turn it around and examine other elements of it beyond just the basic storyline. I do think it works really well as just a straightforward sci-fi horror movie, but there's also so much more in it if you want to look at it. And I do. We don't have a lot of audio clips for this movie just because it is such a visual movie, so I do highly recommend watching it yourself if you haven't, or maybe giving it a rewatch if it's been a while since you've seen it. I want to go ahead and get into the movie itself. I do think that more than most movies that I watch, this is an experience where you're really watching something unfold within the movie itself, and I really love that about it. I think one of my favorite kind of tropes in movies is when someone makes a small bad decision or a very quick bad decision. Something small happens, and then over the course of the movie, it just snowballs. It continues to get worse. They keep doubling down and just making it into a whole disaster by the end of the movie. And I feel like this movie really falls into that category. So I want to look at that and exactly how that happens for this guy. So we start out at some kind of scientific networking party that I'm not sure really exists, where journalist Veronica meets eccentric scientist Seth Brundle. This party is basically tech bros meet MFA students. Everyone's walking around pretending like they understand each other's projects, but secretly they're just looking for the open bar or waiting for their turn to talk about their own work. Right away with Seth, you can tell this guy is equal parts brilliant and weird. The first lines of the movie really set up that interaction for us.
What am I working on? I'm working on something that'll change the world and human life as we know it.
Change it a lot or just a bit? You'll have to be more specific.
What, do you want me to be specific here in this room with half the scientific community of North America eavesdropping?
Is there another way?
You could come back to my lab.
There's something about the delivery of those lines. You can tell that this is a guy who does not quite know how to interact with other humans, but that he really wants to impress this woman. So, of course, he invites her to see his work. One thing I appreciate about this movie, at just over 90 minutes, is that it absolutely cuts to the chase. We open the movie, our two main characters are already talking, he invites her over to see his lab, and boom, we're in the car and on the way. No extended backstory, no setup montage, just, hey, you want to see my lab? That is delightfully efficient storytelling, and I'm here for it. There are really only 3 characters that we spend any meaningful time with in the movie, and that kind of simplicity, I think, makes it feel like a fable, almost, like a cautionary tale about scientific hubris. I've heard people say that the movie could have been fleshed out more, pun very much intended, but I think the tightness of the storytelling is part of its power. It's claustrophobic, it's focused, and it's emotionally really raw in a way that I like. When they arrive at the creepy industrial warehouse that serves as both his home and laboratory, because of course it does, Seth reveals his invention, 2 telepods that can transport matter from one pod to another. Why? Because cars give him motion sickness, which is honestly just a scientist-y reason to create world-changing technology. I think that is real nerd innovation. And I want to give a shout out to tech in 80s movies, and kind of just the 80s in general, I guess, because everything looks really heavy and clunky and kind of a little shitty. Tech in new movies is always so, sleek and shiny and lightweight, and everything's see-through. Shit in the 80s was made out of 50 pounds of plastic and steel, and sometimes you just had to bang on it to get it to work. For Seth to prove that his invention works, he teleports Ronnie's nylon stocking to the other side of the room, to sexy and flawless result. This is foreplay disguised as science, not just a sterile lab demo. Interestingly enough, she takes off her shoe to then take off her stocking, instead of just giving him the shoe, so we can tell this was a very intentional choice. All with a lot of really hot and intense eye contact. It's honestly the horniest science lesson of all time. You can practically hear the sexual tension humming louder than the machinery. These people are about to discover teleportation, and then third base. And I have to say, even if you don't know that these two actors were dating when they made this movie, you can watch a scene like this and be like, oh yeah, these people are fucking. There's just that immediate chemistry with them. Nothing says trust me with your molecular structure like a guy who disregards safety protocols. Our girl Ronnie is amazed and a little bit in disbelief, but you can tell right away by the way that her eyes dart around and she reaches for her pocket tape recorder that she's absolutely hooked. This moment tells you everything about their dynamic. She's fascinated, drawn in, trying to play it cool, but you can see the curiosity light up behind her eyes. She is in it already. Not just with him, but on the possibility of discovering and witnessing something extraordinary and exciting. I'm sure this is what got her into science journalism in the first place, is wanting to witness things like this. What's interesting to me is that right off the bat, you see Seth as this jittery, brilliant, charming guy, but you can feel the isolation in him as well. Maybe it's the rambling way that he talks, like he's not used to being in a conversation with someone else, but just being alone with his thoughts for too long. Even Ronnie makes a comment about it, like, you don't get out much, do you? So the relationship between Seth and Veronica is established this way. She steps into his hidden, isolated world, and suddenly he's not alone anymore, and the two are linked for the rest of the film. His work is hidden and lonely until Veronica enters the picture. He even explains to her that he works with teams of people who help with parts of the science equipment, but don't know exactly what the project is, and neither does the company that funds his work. Everything has been this secret, private obsession for who knows how long, but it's being seen by somebody else now, and it's an intimate experience in a way that I imagine neither of them truly understands or was ready for. And not to spoil anything, but the movie starts with the first time they're meeting, and it ends with Seth's eventual death, so from beginning to end, it contains the entirety of their relationship, and I don't know why, but I just really like that. It's very neat storytelling. He seems surprised to find out she's recording him with the intent of writing a story, that she's there as a journalist and not just as a woman, and it throws him off. He claims he thought this was personal. It's that first little clash between his idealized connection and her professional reality. Then we meet Ronnie's boss, Stathis Borans, who is immediately the most insufferable man alive. He reacts to the story like Veronica is an idiot, being conned by a guy who's either crazy or just trying to get in her pants. Stathis has quite the character arc, but he gets worse before he gets better. In fairness to Stathis, though, if a strange man ever invited me to his warehouse apartment to show me 2 giant metal pods, I'd also assume it was either a prank or an elaborate Scientology pitch. And it does sound a lot like those pickup artist techniques, where it's like, ooh, carry runes around with you so you have something to grab their interest. Then Veronica and Seth meet again for lunch, and we get this crucial bit of foreshadowing. So far, he's only able to teleport inanimate objects. Living things don't make it through intact. He asks her not to rush to publish anything just yet because he doesn't want to have the story come out until he's got it figured out. He wants to give her exclusive access to follow him and write a book about the discovery once it's perfected. He says, the book will end with me transporting myself 15 feet from one telepod to another. Which we will come back to because, spoiler, it does not. Finally, Veronica heads home to find Stathis taking a shower. We discover that he's not great at boundaries, being both her boss and her ex-boyfriend, and apparently still having a key to her apartment, which he decided to use now on the day he finds out she went to some other guy's house. They talk about Seth and his work. Apparently Stathis has done some background research on him in the meantime. Veronica tries to play it off like she's not that interested in Seth and is thinking about going after a different story, but we can tell it's just a misdirection. This is one of those 80s movies relationships where you just know the boyfriend has like bad cologne and sock garters and thinks nagging is foreplay. I just can't imagine this man being good in bed. No offense to the actor. If this first act has a theme, it's intimacy born from curiosity. Seth's confidence and nervous energy, Veronica's fascination, and that immediate chemistry, it's this perfect storm. Two people drawn to each other for reasons they don't fully understand, both of them chasing something that feels bigger than themselves. Veronica is now fully invested. She's filming Seth's experiments, documenting everything for the story, but also clearly enjoying his company. Seth decides it's time to teleport a live subject, and his choice of test animal is bold, I'll say. A baboon, not like a mouse or a hamster. No, he goes straight into large screaming primate. I'm no scientist, but that feels like skipping a few steps on the ethics checklist. Perhaps instead of a notoriously temperamental ape that can rip your face off, we could start with a chubby rodent? One of the things in the trivia for this movie is that even just having the animal on set was dangerous. You can't really train a baboon. And the only thing that kept it under control was that Jeff Goldblum was so tall and physically imposing that I guess it respected him as the alpha or something. He truly charms both man and beast. And of course, it goes horribly wrong. The baboon arrives on the other end mangled and dead, having essentially been turned inside out. A great moment for practical effects. Veronica tries to keep things moving for posterity, and we get this exchange, which I just absolutely love.
Talk to the tape. Get in the habit. The world will want to know what you're thinking.
Fuck is what I'm thinking.
Good. The world will want to know that.
Honestly, that could be the tagline for the entire scientific process. What are you thinking? Fuck! Every time I see a SpaceX rocket explode, I flash back to this scene. I love it because it's the first time we see how really emotionally invested and yet still objective Veronica already is. She's not recoiling from a very gross and potentially upsetting thing, the loss of an animal life. She's comforting, curious, and gently teasing him back into focus. She's clearly a good journalist, but also this has gone beyond that for her. Seth declares that the problem is with the flesh, which is a phrase that gets thrown around a lot from this point on in the movie. It's basically the complicated essence of a living thing, which differentiates it from a mere object. It can transmit matter, but not life, not the tangible, messy, organic essence that makes something alive. This line about the flesh becomes the movie's central metaphor. Seth is saying that the machine doesn't understand how the flesh works, and thus turned the baboon inside out, not understanding how it was supposed to put it back together correctly. And that makes sense to me. There's a lot more moving parts to an organism than there are to a nylon stocking, and we know from science that if you screw up even small parts of one of those organisms, it can have disastrous results. Just a few little letters out of place, and suddenly your genes aren't sure where your arms are supposed to go. Afterward, we get a few smaller moments that really define their relationship. He shows her his multiple sets of identical clothes, the same outfit replicated over and over, and how it helps him focus on his work. Now, I'm not going to diagnose a guy with autism 20 minutes into a movie, but if I were. Then, in true Cronenberg fashion, their soft flirting immediately turns physical. Veronica offers to cook them some steaks she bought, and instead they have sex. It's passion mixed with intellectual curiosity, a very scientist's idea of foreplay kind of moment. Science/dating tip: if your dinner date starts a sentence with "let's cook some meat for an experiment," you're either about to have sex or commit manslaughter. Make sure you know which before you say yes. Afterwards, Seth rolls over and gets jabbed by some small metal component in his bed. I'm sorry, I don't know what it's supposed to be. It sticks in his back. This will come back later. Veronica helps to remove it and then kisses it to make it better. She bites him because she's a woman and we just do that sometimes. And she explains how it must be the flesh making her crazy. You can practically see the light bulb go off in Seth's head as he has an epiphany and jumps up to teleport a steak and then cook it and make Veronica do a taste test. You'd think as a scientist he'd make her do a blind test, but no, he just plops it in front of her like, "Here, taste the teleported one." And she's like, no? But she does anyway and says it tastes wrong, synthetic. I just imagine that's how everything tasted in the 80s though, so maybe it's fine. The line between mad scientist and boyfriend who ruined dinner has never been thinner. Luckily, she does get to eat the good steak, though. I went back and checked to be sure. So Seth determines that the computer isn't so much moving a thing from one place to another as it is making a copy of the thing at the second location, rebuilding it from its components, and the computer isn't capable of replicating the flesh. It's creating what it thinks it saw, but it doesn't understand the essence of living, or in this case, formerly living, tissue, the soul of the flesh, so to speak. This is the genius of Cronenberg. He's not just making a gross sci-fi horror movie, he's setting up a philosophical question about what it means to be human. What makes us, us? If you can copy every atom, is this new version really the same person? Or just an uncanny imitation that thinks it's you? And the movie continues to come back to this idea. It doesn't ever say the words cloning, but the idea is there. At this point, the romance between Seth and Veronica deepens. Their intimacy and his discovery are completely entwined, each feeding the other. And that's dangerous because his ambition begins to feel personal. It's not just about science anymore, it's about proving himself worthy of her and of greatness. While Seth is caught up in discovery, Veronica leaves his place for a bit to do some shopping. Stathis, who, again, is also her boss, is tailing her and seems unreasonably angry at having seen her come out of Seth's home. This movie certainly has a lot to say about the fragility of men's egos. He follows her into a department store, seething with jealousy.
Don't you get it? I am finally onto something that's big, huge.
Yeah? What? His cock?
Crude status. Very crude.
Truly stellar journalistic ethics from this guy. He's jealous, condescending, and constantly trying to undercut her. His anger isn't about losing her, it's about losing control over her. And that's a theme that plays out against Seth's own dissent later on. Back in the lab, Seth finally figures it out. He manages to tweak the telepod's programming to account for the flesh. How? I don't know. The movie doesn't bother coming up with something to explain it. I honestly really admire when a movie can just hand-wave science-y stuff and it doesn't feel like a total cop-out. We don't always need the 10-minute Jurassic Park ride video about exactly how the dinosaurs were made. Sometimes it's just enough to say, I fixed the programming, yada yada yada, let's get another monkey in here. In one of the film's most satisfying moments, the second baboon test works. The animal pops out of the second pod with all his bits in the right order, as far as we can tell. The joy in this scene is infectious. Veronica and Seth celebrate with champagne, laughing and hugging. It feels like what they've been working toward, like his dream could actually become a reality. She suggests they go away on a trip together, and he suggests they order Chinese food. I like this moment because he's a man who has basically just reinvented physics, and he's like, I know what we need, spicy eggplant. And that's what makes this sequence work for me. It's the emotional high point, the moment before everything starts to unravel, and we really want to stay in it and celebrate with them. I want to see these people just hang out at night and happily eat some Chinese food together. There's a sense that he's rewriting not just the laws of physics, but also his own story. He's conquered the impossible, rewritten the laws of nature, and changed the course of history. But there's also something quietly dangerous in his success. My read on the situation is that he hasn't allowed anyone to really know what he's working on because he hasn't perfected it yet for living creatures. And he doesn't want anyone to know about it if it's ultimately going to be a failure. When he talks to Veronica about writing about it, he says that the book will end with him teleporting himself. Rather than simply being able to teleport inanimate objects, which, don't get me wrong, would still be world-changing and incredibly useful to many industries. He will not reveal his invention until he has mastered ultimate control over the human body itself, which is a big ask. That's where the tragedy begins. Because in the end, Seth doesn't just want to change science so much as he wants to completely transcend it, to become something greater. And as we'll see, that desire to master the body becomes the very thing that destroys it. There's an interesting dynamic where being in this situation together, having this secret, and discovering these new things really fuels the intimacy between them. But it's that same intimacy that ultimately fuels risk-taking, which marks this as the peak before the collapse. Veronica sees some cover story mock-ups that Stathis has commissioned, despite her telling him not to go forward with the story, and she realizes she needs to go confront him and have him call it off. Seth feels jealous and insecure and gets drunk. Always a good combo for doing science. In his impatience, he decides to test teleportation on himself. He's just completed his first successful teleportation experiment with a live animal, and he jumps straight to what he said would be the end of the book, him teleporting himself. It's that classic scientist move. Skip the safety tests and move right into human trials. That's Nobel Prize energy if ever I saw it. You make one baboon teleport and suddenly you think you're the king of molecular physics. Why don't you ever see this happen in other fields? No mathematician ever gets drunk and is like, I'm gonna enter this proof. This moment feels like an emotional pivot point for me. Seth is already reacting to the idea of losing control, losing Veronica's attention, and losing his sense of worth in the process. His response isn't introspection, it's self-destruction disguised as triumph. Unbeknownst to him, a common housefly slips into the pod with him. The fly entering the telepod is casual, almost invisible to Seth. And that's what's ultimately so chilling about it. The thing that ruins Seth's life happens in the background. It feels true to how tragedy often enters our lives through those small, unnoticed moments that only become significant and catastrophic in hindsight. This casualness mirrors how grief often works in real life. The thing that will shatter you can arrive quietly, without ceremony. It also kind of feels like the panic of watching someone send an email with the wrong attachment. Just a slow motion, no. But from Seth's perspective, the teleportation seems flawless. He feels energized, euphoric, and powerful. This is the classic moment of hubris where we see his downfall. He feels inadequate when Veronica isn't there, and insecure about her spending time with another man. His downfall is the sin of male hubris and impatience, a rash choice, that classic tale of a scientist who pushes too far without considering consequences. It's also a cautionary tale about not making big life decisions when wine-drunk and shirtless. Veronica comes back in the middle of the night, and he lets her know that he went through the machine, which she rightfully points out was a dumb idea. Truly, Veronica is the only voice of reason in this movie. She's caught between these two kind of impulsive, immature men, and she's got to be the one to lay down the law. They have a really low-energy fight about the Stathis thing and then quickly make up, which I actually like. Movies tend to dramatize arguments in a romantic relationship, but a lot of times it's just, yeah, okay, we're good. We see a brief glimpse of the wound on his back from before, but now healed and with a few thick hairs growing out of it. That's never a good sign. If I suddenly had insect hairs sprouting out of my back, I'd be on WebMD so fast I'd get carpal tunnel, and then I'd be on WebMD for that. Starting the next morning, Seth shows superhuman strength and stamina, like gymnastic flips, a massive appetite, and a heightened sex drive. I listened to the episode of the podcast Horror Queers, where they talked about this movie, and I loved that they made a connection to how Peter Parker is shown in all the Spider-Man films after he's been bitten, showing off his new strength and agility. This is like Spider-Man, but if Aunt May had to Clorox the bathroom afterward. Seth believes that he's been purified in some way by the machine. He thinks he's transcended the weakness of his previous form, as if it was a good thing that he got drunk and belligerent, because now he's a better, stronger, more powerful man. There's something kind of heartbreaking to me about how hard he tries to spin this. I think that for Seth, admitting that there's something wrong with him at this point would mean acknowledging his own vulnerability, mortality, and imperfection. It's delusion, the classic, I'm fine, I'm better than fine moment that we see in illness narratives, addiction cycles, and even toxic self-improvement cultures. His loss of control becomes a story about self-transformation because that's easier to live with. They go out for a coffee, which he loads up with a horrifying amount of sugar while rambling in a way that only Jeff Goldblum hopped up on caffeine and sugar can do. Or maybe sugar bowls in the 80s were just filled with cocaine, who knows. Every Jeff Goldblum performance teeters on the line between jazz and madness, but this one just jumps headfirst into a piano solo. Soon, he begins to experience strange changes. More of those coarse hairs on his back, skin blemishes, mood swings. Veronica insists on cutting off the gross hairs with a big pair of scissors. She becomes concerned, but Seth dismisses her. He pressures her to teleport, but she refuses. Again, she's the smart one. He calls her a fucking drag, and she tries to convince him that something is wrong, and he says he'll just find someone else. This is where we start entering the gaslighting your girlfriend portion of the movie. His emotions turn outward, trying to drag Veronica into his delusion so that he won't have to face it alone. He's hit that desperate stage between denial and anger, where the reality of loss, in this case the loss of his humanity, is starting to surface, but he's still fighting it at every turn. This is really where the illness allegory begins, with denial, euphoria, and dismissal of concern. It mirrors the early symptoms of disease and also addiction. Obsession, mania, alienation from loved ones. A once controlled, brilliant body begins to fail. It's like watching the world's worst self-care journey. He exfoliates too much, stops sleeping, and loses all of his teeth. These TikTok influencers could never. Seth goes out to a bar and bets these tough guys $100 that he can beat either of them at arm wrestling, and if he wins, he also gets to take their girl home. I think we're approaching new levels of testosterone in one sentence with that one. He snaps the guy's arm so cleanly that we can see bones sticking out, in a scene which is horrific in the brutality of the injury itself, but also in the way that Seth wields this new strength. There's a shocking coldness and lack of empathy from him that we would not have expected from the Seth we knew 15 minutes ago. The rules that once governed his humanity are slipping away. This movie came out in 1986, and then both Over the Top and Predator came out in 1987, all with arm wrestling scenes. Arm wrestling was really having a moment. Are there any other millennials out there who are too traumatized to ever arm wrestle? There was also the famous arm wrestling break during the 1995 World's Strongest Man competition, but I think I might be in the minority on vividly remembering that one. Seth does end up taking the girl home, and in a moment of manic conviction, he goes through the telepod again, which I had forgotten when I sat down to rewatch this movie, as though doubling down on his mutation might make him feel in control of it. He wants that power rush again, to reaffirm his transformation. This feels very addiction-coded to me, in that he's trying to chase that high to get the same feeling that he did the first time. Then he tries to convince her to go through as well, insisting that it's the next stage of evolution. When she refuses, also wisely, he becomes aggressive and physically drags her toward the pod as Veronica walks in. It's here that we get the movie's most famous line,
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
which I think at this point has become so ubiquitous that people forget where it started. Reportedly suggested by Mel Brooks as simple direction for Geena Davis on how she should react to Seth in a scene, but it caught on as a line in the movie and then in the wider world. Veronica confronts Seth, saying she had those strange hairs analyzed by a lab and they were in fact not human but insect. Seth's rage boils over. He punches through the wall while yelling, "Does this look like a sick man?" and kicks her out. At this point, Veronica is like, my boyfriend is supposed to be a scientist, and this is some kind of praying mantis with roid rage. We see Seth's jealousy and arrogance, which began as just emotional flaws, become physicalized. His body enacts what his ego had already decided, that he is above human limitation. What started out as scientific hubris is now an existential one. From here, Seth's physical changes accelerate. His fingernails peel off, his teeth fall out, his skin oozes and splits. You really have to give credit to these legendary special effects. Wet, tactile, and deeply uncomfortable. This is the part of the movie where 80s makeup artists will flex like, oh, we spent 6 weeks perfecting the texture of that ear pus. But it also manages to portray this really profound sadness. Cronenberg doesn't play these moments as monstrous spectacle. he lingers on Seth's self-awareness. We really stop seeing Seth as just a scientist and start seeing him also as a patient. Instead of some kind of monster succumbing to horrible transformation, we're allowed to see him as a man watching his own body betray him in slow motion. The horror comes from how aware he is of what's happening to him. There's something really profoundly upsetting about watching someone's fingernails come off, which is why I'm glad my skincare routine stops at mild exfoliation. Seth compulsively documents his transformation on a video diary, talking to himself like a patient charting symptoms. He's very much like someone living with a degenerative illness. The same man who once chased transcendence through science is now trapped by it. It's part medical journal, part vlog. Hey guys, I just wanted to update you on my molting journey. Eventually, by interrogating his computer, Seth learns the horrifying truth. The machine didn't just copy him, it fused him, at the molecular level, with the fly that shared the pod. He's not exactly infected, he's becoming something else altogether. This is why IT departments tell you not to plug in things you don't understand. Somewhere, a grad student just screamed, you didn't even back up your DNA, my dude? In a quiet, heartbreaking moment, Seth calls Veronica and begs her to come see him. When she arrives, he's drastically worse than the last time she saw him. His body is crumbling, his skin is sagging, and she's frightened by his deteriorating appearance. He describes his condition as a bizarre form of cancer and admits that he knows he's dying. As Veronica cries and wonders what they should do, he tries to eat. Seth picks up a donut out of a box and, to both of their horror, vomits digestive enzymes on it. His reaction is embarrassed and almost apologetic, like he did it out of instinct without realizing it. We can see that the fly is taking over, and his powerlessness to control it in this moment is devastating. Imagine you're trying to have a heart-to-heart and your partner just projectile melts your breakfast pastry. Veronica's reaction is complicated and deeply human. She doesn't recoil from him because she finds him disgusting, but because she's witnessing the disintegration of someone she loves. We get to witness that grief in real time, the unbearable act of watching someone you love disappear inside their own body. She's torn between empathy and revulsion. The film refuses to give either of them, or us as the audience, a clean emotional thread. Veronica could either disregard the changes in him and continue to love him unconditionally, keeping a stiff upper lip and figuring out what needs to be done, or she could recoil and reject him completely, running away rather than face their new reality. Instead, she's kept somewhere in between, where she still clearly cares about Seth, but has trouble coming to terms with what's happening to him and controlling her natural reaction of revulsion. Seth could either miraculously find a way to heal himself and reverse the transformation, returning to normal with a newfound respect for experimental ethics, or he could die quickly and with dignity. Instead, he does neither, continuing to devolve with thinning hopes of any kind of salvation. As the audience, we're torn between having empathy for Seth and being repulsed by what he's becoming. These uncomfortable middle spaces are ultimately what makes the movie so haunting and emotionally effective. There's something painfully human about how polite she still tries to be. Like, oh no, you're leaking again, honey. Let me grab a towel. This is where the illness metaphor fully blooms. Seth's transformation reads as a stand-in for terminal disease, disability, or even simple aging. The fear of the body as an unreliable narrator. It lingers in the unbearable emotional space of chronic illness, disability, and grief. The slow loss of self, the fading of what made you you. His body becomes a site of both horror and mourning. I read somewhere that Cronenberg has said that The Fly was inspired by watching friends die of cancer, and it shows. The focus isn't on mutation as punishment, but inevitability. What happens when your body stops cooperating with the story you've always told about yourself? And it really raises some philosophical questions as well. When does Seth stop being Seth? Is it when his DNA changes, or when his self-concept fully erodes? His own invention becomes his death sentence, but it's also his only way to make sense of what's happening to him. This is science as self-destruction, illness as transformation, and love as the unbearable act of witnessing decay. There's a strange poignancy in the idea that the thing destroying him is also what made him extraordinary. Like many real-world illnesses, it's not an outside invasion so much as his own system that turned against itself. This is certainly the most emotionally harrowing stage of the transformation, and it sets up the final act's questions about identity, embodiment, and mercy. The story has shifted fully from scientific wonder to tragic inevitability. The horror of realizing that the body you rely on has become your cage. Veronica explains the situation with Seth to Stathis, because I guess there's no one else in her life, and he asks to see the proof of what's happening. When she gets back to Seth's place, he's literally climbing the walls. His body is mutating faster now, and his mind is splintering. He tells her that the disease wants to turn him into something else, Brundlefly. He's accepted that this is no longer a condition he can cure, but an evolution that he will be consumed by. He asks her to record this new existence, as if turning it into data might give him some level of control or dignity in the situation. Later, Veronica discovers that she's pregnant. The baby is Seth's, but because they had sex both before and after the telepod accident, she has no way of knowing if the baby will carry his new genetic complications. She confesses this to Stathis. Terrified of carrying a mutant baby, she falls into a nightmare that has become one of the most iconic scenes in horror cinema, giving birth to a giant, writhing maggot. I love this scene because it's grotesque and primal, really tapping into the deepest fear of reproductive horror, that your body can betray you from within and produce a monster. It's like the movie said, remember Rosemary's Baby? What if we combined that with the larval grossness of an alien chestburster? Perfect nightmare, 10 out of 10 Cronenbergs. Terrified of carrying an abomination, Veronica insists on an abortion, while Seth argues that she must keep the baby. For 1986, I did just want to remark on how not anti-abortion this movie manages to be. Veronica's insistence, get this thing out of my body, is about survival, not morality. Stathis doesn't argue, and the doctor that he eventually takes her to hesitates mostly on the grounds that it's the middle of the night and she seems really distressed and unsure. Maybe they could do some tests first to be safe. Even Seth's argument isn't moral, it's selfish. He sees the baby as his last opportunity to regain some humanity. No one questions whether Veronica should have the choice. The horror isn't that she wants an abortion, but that her body and her consent are under siege by forces she can't control. Now, I wasn't alive when this movie came out, so I can't say for sure if it was particularly progressive for its time, or if we've just gone so far backwards at this point that it seems radical to suggest that a woman would be the one in charge of this decision about her own body. Honestly, it's nice to have a feminist moment in a movie that also contains so much wall punching and arm wrestling. Seth is barely human now. His voice is distorted. We see patches of exoskeleton covering his skin, and he can no longer eat without vomiting digestive fluid. This man, who once spoke with manic brilliance, now buzzes and mutters, haunted by what's left of his intellect trapped within this new vessel. Veronica, panicked and grieving, begs Stathis to take her to get an abortion immediately, tonight. On the one hand, I get this idea of waiting until morning or running some tests, but Veronica's like, no, we're doing this shit tonight. My boyfriend is turning into a literal insect. I've got enough to worry about. Which is totally fair. Stathis is able to call on a contact to help out, but before the procedure can begin, Seth bursts through a window and drags Veronica away, pleading for her to keep the baby. I also like that we have no follow-up with the doctor and his reaction to this. I guess if you're an abortion doctor, you've probably seen some shit as far as people trying to stop you from doing your job. Back at his lab, Seth is still clinging to the idea that there's a solution in fusion, that combining himself, Veronica, and the baby will get him back to a state near humanity. Stathis intervenes, having followed them back to the lab with a shotgun, because that's simply how one arrives for a Cronenberg finale, but is mutilated when Brundle dissolves his hand and foot with corrosive vomit in a really iconic and gross scene. This is the movie's way of saying, in case you forgot, practical effects are awesome, and also maybe I hope you weren't eating soup. Veronica screams and begs him to stop, but it's clear that Seth no longer sees love as anything but possession. Seth's transformation here is total, emotionally if not physically. His love for Veronica has mutated into this desperate attempt to regain control by using her body as mere components for his rebuilding. Like an insect, his strongest instinct is for survival at any cost. His body, his mind, his empathy are all consumed by this potential solution of fusion. If we're one, we can't lose each other. It's a horrifying metaphor for the way that illness and obsession can collapse boundaries between people until all semblance of autonomy disappears. Seth's plan is gruesome but strangely logical. Since he is half human, and Veronica and the baby are 2 humans, then if they teleport together, they'll be combined into something that's closer to being one whole human. He forces her into a telepod and locks her in before entering its mate across the room. There's a desperate kind of logic to this plan. If he can't fix himself, maybe he can merge into something new. There's such a raw, almost religious desperation to it, like he's trying to make meaning out of his own destruction. He can't save himself, so instead he will change the definition of what himself is. I like this aspect because it reflects the kind of process that people dealing with illness or addiction or similar experiences go through. When science and reason have been exhausted, turn to religion for answers and some glimmer of hope. The movie at this point becomes about theology. He's practically praying to the machine for rebirth. It's very, please God, let the code compile. In trying to get away, Veronica accidentally rips off his lower jaw, and he drags her to the machine. We get this amazing scene where parts of his human body fall away to reveal the gooey fly body underneath. It's one of the most visceral transformation scenes in the movie, and perhaps all of horror history. His humanity literally sloughs off in chunks until all that remains is the slick, monstrous form of Brundlefly. Every time someone refers to this as a special effects sequence, I want to remind them this is a man wearing 5 hours of prosthetics, 2 layers away from an emotional breakdown. Stathis, who is not quite dead, stumbles over with the shotgun and manages to shoot the power cable, powering off Veronica's telepod with just a few seconds remaining, but not cutting the sequence short. Seth breaks through the glass of his pod to get to Veronica, but gets caught up in the machinery and ends up fused with the machine itself for some reason that I don't entirely understand, but I'm not a scientist. I'd like to think that Cronenberg's creative process was like, what if Kafka's Metamorphosis, but also an office printer? And honestly, I'm not mad about it. The result is grotesque, even more than before somehow. A humanoid fly thing with twisted metal and ruined flesh. Clearly, in agony, the creature crawls to Veronica, who is holding the shotgun. But it's not with anger or malice, but despair and resignation. He grabs the barrel of the gun and connects it to his head, silently pleading for her to end his life. He's not a monster anymore. He's a man who knows what needs to be done. Tearfully, she shoots him, killing Brundlefly. It's one of the most compassionate endings Cronenberg ever shot. This combination of grief, love, mercy, and horror all in a single breath. Imagine if Old Yeller were 6'4" and dripping with acid, and Travis were somehow pregnant with his baby. Or maybe don't do that, actually. Veronica collapses in grief as the lab smolders. Her sobs are raw and final. We're witnessing something more than the relief of a woman who survived a terrible ordeal and defeated a monster. This is someone who's dealing with the difficult reality of having committed an act of mercy at the request of someone she cared for. We're left without any kind of hopeful resolution, just this sense of devastation, love, and loss. Veronica has no further comfort or care to give beyond this unbearable gift of release. Cronenberg's horror has always been about the wreckage left behind, and The Fly ends with exactly that. A woman who's had to become caregiver, executioner, and survivor all at once. The issue of her pregnancy remains unresolved, a lingering question mark over her future. This movie really said, we don't have closure. Is trauma okay? It really works because it refuses catharsis. We don't get some final hopeful speech or revelation, big triumphant music swelling under the credits. It's not even the Terminator ending with, oh, me and my baby, we're going to be just fine. I've got a plan. There's this really flat, awful conclusion to it. It wants to leave you with a feeling of grief. We're meant to mourn for Seth, his brilliance, for the future that might have been, and for the body that ultimately betrayed him. The Fly lulls you into a false sense of security with the gross special effects and the scary creature, but it sticks with you because of the undeniable humanity of it all. And that's really the note this whole thing ends on, right? Forcing you to confront that ultimately, body horror isn't about monsters. It's about what happens when love meets decay, and you're forced to choose between compassion and survival. Rom-coms, am I right? Now that we've talked through the story of Seth Brundle's, we'll call it wellness journey, I want to talk about why this movie still feels so deeply uncomfortable even 40 years later. It's not just the gooey transformation scenes, though let's be honest, they are truly disgusting. It's the fact that this is a horror that lives inside the body. It's not a monster that comes after you that you can lock behind a door to escape from. It's a monster that you become. Body horror forces us to confront what we can't avoid. Death, decay, change. It's something that we all know, and these films make us look at it head on. It's some of the purest kind of horror because it's not about something supernatural, but the truth of our existence. I think it can be easy to fall into the trap of thinking about horror as being the opposite of humanity. It's just about monsters or about otherness or about what's outside. But something that it's clear Cronenberg understands very deeply is that horror can be a mirror of our humanity. It gives a shape to our fears in a way that's both safe and cathartic. I can't remember the source, but I read somewhere that Cronenberg said the movie is about aging and illness and disease, but that it's harder to make a movie about those things straightforwardly. If you couch it in the language of sci-fi, dress it up with some special effects, then you can get really deep into these explorations of concepts that upset us and make us think. Cronenberg's work overall suggests that horror isn't a departure from the human experience. It is the human experience, just turned inside out. Almost like a baboon in a telepod. And while it's absolutely a gross movie, it's also kind of beautiful in a really dark way. It's a film that reminds us that empathy doesn't end where disgust begins. It manages to be both about fear and acceptance. Loving something or someone all the way through their transformation, even when it hurts to look at them. It's a movie about the horror of change, but also the tenderness that can exist inside it. Watching The Fly makes you feel your own mortality in your bones. And I think that's something that great horror can do, to remind us that being alive is both messy and temporary, and that maybe that's kind of the point. Body horror specifically is such a personal kind of terror because it doesn't let you escape into fantasy. You can't just say, well, that would never happen to me. I would never put myself in that position, when the position is just existing in a physical form. And that's what this movie absolutely nails. There's something so intimate and almost invasive about the way the movie shows us Seth's transformation. It's not a 60-second transformation sequence where we get to see him morph into a fly all of a sudden. It's slow, it's personal, and with the detail and focus on the practical effects, Cronenberg guarantees that you'll feel every bit of it. He doesn't give you the mercy of a quick camera cut away, but forces you to witness the gory details. The fingernails, the teeth, the skin, each one a betrayal. It sounds obvious to say it, but your body is such a personal thing. You live in it, you identify with it. On some level, it is you. It is both us and the thing that protects us from the outside world. So you want to think you can always trust it to be the same and to perform how you need it to. You're so fused with the thing that carries you around. So when body horror makes you watch it fail, it goes beyond being just physical horror and becomes this whole existential thing. Unlike slasher horror, there's not an external villain here. The body is the villain. Seth is both victim and monster, scientist and experiment, man and fly. And that duality is something that feels like so much of a gut punch because it's rooted in something that we all know but don't like to think about. The body can turn against us at any time. Illness, disease, injury, disability, even the slow but inevitable decline of age. These things can happen to all of us. We all live with the potential for decay. This is a brand of horror that doesn't so much ask what if as when. And that's the thing. Body horror can definitely be a fear of death, but it's also a fear of transformation, of loss of control, of watching yourself slip away while still being conscious enough to understand it. There's this horror in realizing that you can't necessarily trust the thing that's supposed to protect you. That's what defines Seth's journey, is that he doesn't really lose his mind. He documents everything that happens to him. He never lets go of the science. That awareness is what takes this movie from creature feature to tragedy. I imagine if they remade this movie for a modern audience, Seth would be the world's most horrifying vlogger. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be peeling off my fingernails and pondering the futility of existence. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out my other video on how to use your own digestive enzymes to turn those pesky nachos into an easy to swallow goo. Sorry, that was gross. But that instinct to record himself, to kind of document his suffering as a way of giving it some meaning or value, is very relatable to a lot of people these days. I think that's part of why people with disabilities and chronic illnesses see this movie a bit differently. For them, the horror isn't in the abstract. It's a very recognizable thing that they live with on a daily basis. The fear of losing function, identity, or autonomy, it's right there. I have a partner who is a mechanical engineer, and something that we've talked about is how he struggles with the way his body is not like a machine. We want it to be as simple as calories in, calories out, or similar, but it's absolutely not. There are too many different interwoven processes going on in your body. Too many variables, from genes to hormones to hydration to tolerances, and even medical experts often can't predict how a person is going to react to something. If people were like machines, you could give 10 of them the same medicine and you'd expect them all to have the same reaction and effects, but it's never that simple. That's why we have to do clinical testing. And if you're someone like my partner or like Seth in the movie who has dedicated your life to working with these very predictable and stable machines, that kind of uncertainty can be confusing, frustrating, or downright impossible to accept. It shouldn't be. If there's something wrong with the machine, there simply must be a way to get in there and fix it. Replace something, reroute something, flush the system, reboot it. But bodies don't work that way. Something I've encountered a lot in chronic illness communities is that people will come in and be like, is it okay for us to do XYZ? And the consensus is you kind of just have to try it for yourself and figure it out. We may all have the same disease, but yours is still different from mine because of a million other things going on in our bodies at any given time. Everyone has their own unique levels of tolerance, and they can change frequently. There's a level of unpredictability in biology that really throws off a mind that's used to logical answers. There's a level of control that you're simply not able to have. And when we talk about body horror, what we're really talking about is a loss of control. That's why it works. It's a reminder that we're not permanent, that this flesh vessel we live in is fragile and temporary and unpredictable. And what's interesting to me about the way that it's presented in this film in particular is that it's not really presented as a punishment for evil, but just the consequence of being human and overreaching a little too far. The movie glosses over this conclusion, but if you think about it, it suggests that if it weren't for the fly, Seth's teleportation would have been completely successful. So it's not even that the science was bad, it's just that he was a little bit careless and didn't double check to find out about the second genetic signature in the pod with him before he went on. It was a simple mistake made in a matter of seconds, and as a result, it completely ruined his life. That's heavy. And I think it really connects with the illness and disability narrative, because so often it's totally random or the result of a quick and maybe careless choice in unfortunate circumstances. I think everyone has had at least a moment where their body betrayed them. Sickness, injury, aging. You get sick or hurt and you see your body change in a way that you didn't ask for. You start to feel like you're losing yourself. Watching Seth fall apart makes you think about how fragile we really are. That's what Cronenberg captures so brutally well. It's fascinating to me to consider how many of those moments I've had in my life, where just a few seconds of saying the wrong thing or making a bad decision or being too careless have completely changed the trajectory of my life. I don't like to get bogged down in what ifs, but they're really easy to fall into. Are there jobs that I could have kept or lost? Relationships I could have saved or gotten out of sooner? Illnesses or injuries I could have avoided or gotten away from? How many times could I have died from making a bad decision in the blink of an eye without even realizing it? How many dangers were lurking in the background that I never noticed? Our lives are a collection of these forks in the road, what we might think of now as this multiverse of different actions and choices. If there had been a computer panel in the telepod showing the 2 genetic signatures and requiring some kind of confirmation, maybe Seth would have been fine, and he and Ronnie could be billionaires and have a handful of tall, devastatingly attractive children. If they had just communicated a little better, maybe Ronnie could have explained the situation with Stathis, and Seth wouldn't have felt so insecure when she left to deal with him. If, and if, and if. And that brings us back to grief, because grief is, in its own way, another confrontation with impermanence. Whether it's the loss of someone else or the slow loss of yourself, it's all part of the same truth. Nothing stays whole forever. We're probably all familiar with the concept of the Kubler-Ross 5 stages of grief. I believe it's been expanded these days, but that was at least the original iteration. The idea is that when someone is faced with their own mortality, they often go through an emotional journey through these stages: denial, anger, fear, bargaining, and acceptance. It's not always that clean or that linear, of course, but for the purposes of this story, we'll stick to it. We start with denial, where we see Seth refusing to believe that anything is wrong and actually thinking that he's been improved. Right after the teleportation accident, he feels better than ever and even explains to Veronica that he believes the machine purified him somehow. I think that word alone should be a red flag. He frames the change as an evolution, that he's becoming something new, something better, rather than a destruction. Having gone through this experience that, even if it were successful, is bound to have affected him in some way, but he seems to want to pass this trauma off as some kind of transcendence. There's definitely a cultural obsession these days with self-improvement and control over the body, biohacking and all of that. If the transformation took longer to see negative effects, I could absolutely see it being some kind of fad for super wealthy people. And maybe it would be if there wasn't a fly in the pod. In his relationship with Veronica at this point in the movie, we see him manic, euphoric, unstoppable. Then we move into anger. Veronica is more unsettled than impressed by this change, and expressing her concerns to him, he begins to move into that anger. Being confronted with the truth of what's going on makes it harder for him to stick to his narrative about being purified, and so he lashes out at her and calls her weak, kicks her out of his house and says he'll find someone else who can keep up, and then takes out his anger on a tough guy at the bar. When there's no one else around, he destroys his lab and rips off his fingernails in fury. He's feeling angry at the loss of control and his physical decline. It's that toxic masculine urge to see his weakness as failure and lashing out to reclaim some kind of power over his body and his environment. The violent imagery of his body betraying him absolutely brings to mind how people with illness sometimes feel betrayed by their own biology, and that anger of, why won't it just work like it's supposed to? It feels to me at some point like his anger shifts from being directed outward at Ronnie to inward at himself and his own body. Then we move into the bargaining stage, and this one is probably the most interesting to me in this movie. Seth tries to rationalize that maybe the insect is a part of him now, and maybe that's not a bad thing. He thinks he can try to fuse with Veronica and the baby as an attempt to fix what's wrong with him and claw his way back to control. It feels a lot like addiction bargaining, that idea of one more experiment, one more dose of control, just one more time and I can really fix it this time. And there's definitely that element with chronic illness and terminal illness too, like maybe if we try this experimental drug or this pseudoscience treatment or these supplements, maybe this time it'll work. And sometimes in the end, it's just not enough. As a scientist, it's like he believes that with enough intellect and scientific know-how, he can negotiate his own mortality. There's this particular thing about thinking that you can logic your way out of grief, that surely there's something you can do. Cronenberg has this fascination with transcendence and the blurred lines between body and technology. And as the viewer, we have to wonder if this fusion plan is just horror, or is it representing some kind of warped hope? When Seth moves into the depression stage, I think it's really effective. There's a scene where he records a message where he describes himself as an insect who dreamt he was a man, echoing the famous Chinese poem. He isolates himself completely in his home, ashamed to be seen by anyone or just worried about their reaction to his new monstrous form. There's this quiet despair about him. The gore of body horror slows down a bit here. Seth stays in the gradual state of in-betweenness for a while as the film lingers on his grief. The empathy shifts fully toward him. Even as we recoil from what he's becoming, we still feel pity for him. In the final scenes, we see him move into acceptance as he silently places the shotgun to his own head, asking Veronica to end his miserable life. It's not a redemption, just a release. He's finally acknowledging what he has become. We see him choose the dignity of deciding his own death over surviving in the uncertainty of what more could happen to him. Acceptance doesn't necessarily mean peace, but a clarity of what should happen, or what will happen. In Veronica's dual role as both executioner and mourner, she reaches the same kind of acceptance. The film ends without triumph, just mercy. There's a kind of emotional honesty that's rare in horror. Usually when you see the final girl kill the monster in the end, it's a victory, but Veronica's situation is much more complicated. When we watch The Fly through this lens of grief, it stops being a story that's just about transformation. It becomes a story about the ways that we mourn. Seth is grieving his body, his identity, his humanity, and the life he might have had, with a partner, a baby on the way, and a successful world-changing scientific discovery. And maybe that's what makes it such a difficult watch. We've all lost some version of ourselves, and we've all had to decide whether to deny, fight, bargain, despair, or finally let it go. We can't talk about The Fly without talking about the context and the timing. This film came out in 1986, in the middle of the AIDS epidemic. Cronenberg has said that he didn't intend it to be an allegory for AIDS specifically, but that he doesn't mind if people see it that way. It feels like a square rectangle thing to me. The movie is more about illness as a whole, but AIDS is a part of that. And it was a very relevant part of that when the movie came out. There's a lot to be read into Seth's lesions, his vomiting, his body wasting away, the concern about possibly being contagious and spreading what's happened to him, even though we know as the audience that that's not how it works. It really fits into this cultural panic about the body becoming diseased and othered. Seth's denial and isolation mirror how society treats illness. Stigmatized, hidden, weirdly moralized. Oh, he did it to himself. If only he weren't so reckless with his behavior. He pushed too far. He should have realized that what he was doing was dangerous. And ultimately, this idea that sickness or disability is a kind of punishment for bad behavior, bad choices, still echoes in how people talk about chronic illnesses today. And there's also this emotional side to it with Veronica. She still loves him, but she's terrified. Veronica's compassion in the face of horror parallels what many caregivers go through, loving someone whose body is changing in ways that terrify you. There's definitely an element of the transformation as a metaphor for becoming visibly different, and the social consequences of that, as with terminal illness or disability. Seth's transformation makes him visibly different. He becomes othered, pitied, feared, and suddenly he's not treated as fully human anymore. We see Seth at one point using crutches to get around his own home, and he stops leaving the house entirely. God knows how he got the groceries we see him with. Maybe they still did grocery delivery in Toronto in the 80s. Or maybe Seth's been ordering a lot of pizza and vomiting on it off screen. It's grotesque, but it's also deeply sad. And seriously, that isolation is so real. Whether it's chronic illness, disability, cancer, there's this societal tendency to disappear people once they don't fit into the mold of healthy, functional member of society. We don't know what to say, so we don't want to see it. And Cronenberg forces us to look. We want to feel pity, but pity is cheap. Pity distances you. Empathy asks you to imagine yourself in that same decaying skin. I think The Fly invites empathy for people whose bodies change in ways we can't control. This film can feel personal if you've watched someone you care about get sick. How quickly hope and horror can coexist. You could love someone and still be scared of and by what's happening to them. You can feel disgust. You can feel horrified. You can feel uncomfortable. That's not heartlessness. That's the honest, messy intersection of love, grief, and fear. And the fun of this movie is that you don't have to choose between those emotions. You get to feel them all at once. Let's talk about hubris, that classic horror movie theme. Seth is the archetypal tragic scientist, visionary but emotionally impulsive. He's arrogant, brilliant, but also somehow naive and curious. It's a really interesting combination that I think Jeff Goldblum pulls off so well. I read that Mel Gibson was considered for the part, and I can't picture him capturing the essence of Seth Brundle in quite the same way. His fatal flaw isn't just pride, but loneliness. He wants to be special and loved. That desperation and that very human need to prove himself becomes the thing that destroys him. We see his invention as being a symbol of his control over nature, over imperfection, and even over mortality itself. It becomes a horror story the moment he stops accepting his own limits. Seth becomes an almost Victor Frankenstein figure, using his own body as the creature. His work isn't done with the intent of defying God. He's just a guy who doesn't want to deal with motion sickness anymore, and in process completely rewrites the laws of nature. Is Seth a victim of his own ego, or just of bad luck? How much of his downfall is the result of toxic masculinity? That pressure to be the smartest, the strongest, the most in control. Seth, and Stathis too, have this very masculine fear of weakness, of being flawed or dependent. So when Seth's body starts falling apart, it's very hard for him to ask for help. He just doubles down and tries to fix it himself until there's nothing left. And that feels so human to me, that desperate need to make your mark, to prove that you're not ordinary. It's just that in this story, the desire kind of literally eats him alive. At the center of this body horror monster movie, there's a love story, and that's what makes the end so devastating. Veronica, I see as an incredible character. Grounded, empathetic, smart, ambitious. She doesn't run from Seth immediately like many people would. She stays and tries to help. She's the one raising concerns initially and trying to convince Seth that there's something wrong when he refuses to see it. She's taking it seriously before anyone else. Her compassion is genuine, but it also becomes a trap. Seth weaponizes her love to justify his obsession. The pregnancy subplot brings in questions of bodily autonomy and pushes it to a breaking point. Who gets to decide what happens to a body, whether that's your own or someone else's? What if that body might be part monster? Seth's plea to fuse them together into the ultimate family is something that he sees as an act of unity, but as the audience we're more likely to view it as an act of desperation, a man grasping at molecular straws. It's horrifying because it violates consent under this guise of connection and bringing them closer together. He's desperate to erase the separation between them, but it feels more like consumption than love. He thinks he can use her to get his life back, to literally regain some semblance of humanity. So we can see her choice at the end as being not just mercy, but also a way of reclaiming her own agency. By killing Seth, she gets to be the one to make the decision about what to do with her baby. And it raises some interesting questions about what it means to love someone who's becoming monstrous, whether that's literally or metaphorically. If this hadn't happened to Seth, we assume she would still be happy to have his baby. But because of this, she doesn't know for sure whether that baby is going to turn out like him the way he is now or not. And for her, that means she doesn't want to have it. She doesn't want to take that risk. And that's where this movie gets me every time. Because you want it to be a love story. You want to believe that Seth can come back via some magical movie science or Deus Ex Machina revelation. But some transformations can't be undone. And sometimes love means letting go. It's a love story that ends the way every millennial relationship does. Someone crying, someone gooey, and a gun involved, metaphorically or otherwise. The big thing that I really wanted to talk about with this movie is probably the broadest question that it presents. What makes you, you? For anyone who hasn't heard of it, there's a famous philosophical thought experiment called the Ship of Theseus. The idea is basically, if a ship has all of its wooden planks removed and replaced one by one over time until not a single original piece remains, is it still the same ship? Or at what point do you consider it changed from one thing to another? It's a fun thought experiment until you realize that's literally what's happening to Seth in this movie. His cells, his skin, his organs, his DNA, all gradually mixed together and replaced with something else. There's not really an exact moment that you can pinpoint where he stops being Seth Brundle and starts being Brundle Fly. It's incremental, and we feel as though the Seth we knew is still in there somewhere. That's what makes it so disturbing. The Fly turns this old philosophical problem into something visceral. You can debate the Ship of Theseus with someone over coffee, but Cronenberg shows you what it looks like when the ship is your own body, when the thing being replaced piece by piece is your own flesh. From a philosophical standpoint, this isn't just a question about matter, it's a question about identity over time. What does it actually mean to persist as the same person from one moment to the next? If your memories shift, if your emotions change, if your body mutates, what is the continuity? Seth keeps trying to draw that line for himself. Early on, when the changes begin, he says things like, I'm getting stronger, I'm purified, I'm better. He's changing, but he's trying to frame those changes as things that are making him more himself. He's trying to preserve a sense of self through language, as if naming the transformation gives him control over it. But the longer it goes on, the harder it becomes to find where Seth ends and the Fly begins. There's another philosophical concept I want to bring into the conversation, which is mereology, the study of part-whole relationships. When does a collection of parts become a whole? Is what we consider Seth merely a sum of his biological parts, or something more abstract? A pattern, a continuity of consciousness. There's this quote from the movie What Dreams May Come after, spoiler, I guess, Robin Williams' character dies, and he's in the afterlife regaining some kind of consciousness and talking to his spirit guide.
Oh, am I really here?
What do you mean by you anyway? Are you your arm or your leg?
Hardly.
Really? If you lost all your limbs, wouldn't you still be you?
I'd still be me.
So, what is the me?
My brain, I suppose.
Your brain. Your brain is a body part. Like your fingernail or your heart. Why is that the part that's you?
Because I, sort of a voice in my head, the part of me that thinks, that feels, that is aware that I exist at all.
So if you're aware you exist, then you do. That's why you're still here.
When Seth starts losing literal pieces of himself, at what point does he cross over from being a person who's sick to being a completely new organism? If you replace enough of a person's body and mind, do they stop being that person? Or are they always somehow still themselves, even when they no longer recognize who that is? It's the Ship of Theseus with fingernails falling off, and what makes the movie so brilliant is that it doesn't give us an answer. If we keep following this idea of Seth as a living Ship of Theseus, we get to something that's central to Cronenberg's entire body of work, that the mind and the body aren't separate things at all, but the same organism. In Cronenberg's world, you can't really talk about identity or sanity or even love without talking about flesh. The body isn't just a container for the self, it is the self. Every sensation, every thought, every emotional reaction is rooted in the body's chemistry, in its nerves and hormones and fragile physical systems. There was this really excellent article from Travis Woods that I read, and I'll try to remember to link it in the show notes because I wanted to pull out a couple of quotes from it that felt really fitting to me to end this conversation about identity.
The most horrific reality faced by sentient beings is not that we are locked within inescapable meat prisons designed to decay before collapsing into death, but that the one thing we hold to be truly immutable within that prison, the one thing we hold to be truly our own, our identity, is just as susceptible to disruption and infection as our pitiable bodies. If our minds, ourselves, are generated by the biological motor of the brain, and the brain is as vulnerable as our bodies to everything from hormone imbalance to terminal disease, aren't we, the essential, intangible us, you, me, just as vulnerable to change as our physical selves? And if so, what does that make us, if anything at all? If our bodies change, if our brains change, does the intangible we change as well? And if it does, if the thing we think of as identity is simply an unprotected cell clump sheathed within a thin-boned skull, part of a larger physiology program to eventually non-exist soon after its existence begins, what definitions do we have aside from those we desperately scramble together as a bulwark against the animal or insect instincts that lurk within the basest level of our biological shells?
Basically, if your mind changes when your body dies, what's left of the you that used to exist? If every cell in your body gets replaced, or in this place fused with a fly, are you still yourself? When does Seth stop being Seth and start being Brundlefly? It's like when you look at your Facebook memories from 10 years ago and think, oh, that person had hope. Are you still that person? Or have you shed enough skin flakes and bad tweets to become someone new? Seth's terror isn't just that his body falls apart, it's that his identity does. He starts out believing he's a rational man of science, a genius in control of his fate. But as his flesh rots, that identity also collapses. Underneath, he's scared, lonely, and desperate for connection and control.
As our bodies change, evolve, and age, what becomes of the selves contained by those bodies, even dictated by those bodies? Are we the same? Are we different? Are we anything? Is identity real or just the insect dream of already dying biological matter? Are we self-constructed? And if so, what dark foundations are we built upon or against? If our bodies are prisons that encase our identities, what do our identities imprison? And if something awful is in there, buzzing in the dark, what does that say about us, about you, about the person next to you? The one you love and trust.
It's existential horror, but slimy. Like Camus if Camus threw up on his croissant.
His self-imposed identity of a rational man of science crumbles like his flaking skin, revealing the terrified and angry adolescent insect that always lurked beneath. Therein lies the true horror of The Fly. That who we are is just as capable of becoming diseased as our bodies, that our constructed identities can fail us as easily as our porous immune systems, that, in the end, all we are is a collection of highly corruptible cells wedded to merciless biological instinct.
We can definitely make some connections here. The 1958 version is a straightforward atomic-era fable. Scientist gets cocky, experiments go wrong, giant fly head, wife screaming, we've all been there. It's a horror morality play for the post-war age, the fear of science outpacing ethics, the anxiety within the lab coat. But this film is much more intimate. The focus isn't on the experiment, but on the aftermath. It's not, oh no, what have I done to science, so much as, oh no, what has science done to my body, my identity, my relationship? The original is about the fear of technology, while the remake is about the fear of biology. That shift from external to internal is what provides the real heart of the movie. If you watch The Fly along Cronenberg's earlier work, Shivers, Rabid, Videodrome, it's like seeing him refine his central obsession. The collision between technology, flesh, and desire. Shivers, in 1979, turned sexuality into an infectious parasite. Videodrome, in 1983, imagined media literally reshaping our bodies. And The Fly distills those ideas into something painfully human. We see how Seth's transformation is both physical and emotional. He's grotesque, but strangely tragic. He's not turning into a monster because of evil, he's turning into one because of love and loneliness. That's what sets it apart. And then you can trace this line forward in Cronenberg's filmography to Dead Ringers in 1988, where identity dissolves into codependency, and to Crash in 1996, where desire fuses with trauma. He keeps coming back to this idea that the body is both the site of horror and the proof of life. It's like he's been trying to warn us for decades. Your body will betray you. Your technology will betray you. And honestly, your boyfriend probably will too. Thematically, The Fly also owes a debt to Frankenstein. Both are stories about men who want to control life itself and who end up creating something that reflects their own flaws back at them. You can also see shades of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde with this idea of transformation as a way to externalize inner chaos. And of course on an insect level, there's also that resonance with Kafka's Metamorphosis. Gregor Samsa wakes up as a bug and becomes an embarrassment to his family. Seth becomes one and turns into a tragedy. In both cases, it's about isolation, disgust, and losing one's place in the world. Since this episode is touching a lot on illness, identity, and transformation, I wanted to throw in a bunch of recommendations for real-world documentaries and things that you might want to check out if this is a subject that interests you. There's Silver Lake Life, The View from Here, in 1993. This one is an unflinching, loving chronicle of two men living with AIDS, filmed as one of them deteriorates. Beautiful, brutal, and very human. My Left Foot in 1989 is not a documentary, but powerful for how it treats disability as the core of identity and not as a tragedy. It's based on a true story, though, with great acting from Daniel Day-Lewis. There's Unrest from 2017, which is Jennifer Bray's film about her experience with chronic fatigue syndrome. It explores how illness redefines identity in relationships. A few films from 2016 actually showed up here, so Notes on Blindness is a poetic kind of docudrama based on audio diaries of a man losing his sight, exploring the boundary between body, perception, and identity. And then Gleason is a deeply emotional documentary about NFL player Steve Gleason's experience with ALS. It's raw and hopeful and mirrors The Fly's tenderness amid physical decline. And this one is super out there, but I think you can still find it on YouTube. It was a 2004 TLC documentary, back when TLC did actual documentary work, called The Boy Whose Skin Fell Off. It follows a man named Johnny Kennedy after he was diagnosed with terminal skin cancer. We see him through the final months of his life, documenting his condition and grappling with his own mortality. This one is intense, but I remember watching it on TV around when it came out, and it definitely left an impression on me. And now, I want to take you through a chat that I had with my good friend Antonio, who just watched this movie for the first time this week. We did manage to lose the first 20 to 30 minutes of the conversation that we were having about the movie, so we're going to go ahead and join this conversation already in progress. Yeah, so when you watched the movie, you told me that finishing it felt like a great video game and not knowing what to do next. Do you still feel that way?
Oh, I 100% feel that way. There have been a few moments in my life where I have felt like that, where I finish a game, I finish a movie, but just watching something from like 1986, of all things. I mean, it might happen with even older movies like the 1960s.
Yeah, 40 years ago.
Yeah, 40 years ago. For it to do that, I can't wrap my mind around it, how even 40 years later, it's still really fucking good. And it's like, oh my God. I did not feel the same way when I watched The Shining. I felt Jack's
Yes.
slow descent into madness. I could understand how it was happening and why it was happening. But it didn't have that whole, like, God, what do I do myself afterward? I think recently finding out I'm into body horror a lot. Added onto that, it's like, I literally had my hands at my side on the desk, looking up at the ceiling like, what do? Do I go to sleep? Do I watch something else? Do I listen to music? I was like, what? That's so few and far in between that I love when that happens to me, because it's just a phenomenal feeling of just watching a film do that to you.
But, like, what do you think that feeling is? What's the difference between something like this and The Shining? Is it a relatability? Is it an emptiness? Is it an overload of emotion?
I think I'm trying to make sense of everything that happened all at once, because I could see parts of myself in Seth with the, like, staring, doesn't know where to look, or constantly moving around when talking and stuff like that. It's like, oh, he's like me, not putting myself in Seth's shoes, because I'm not that fucking smart. But it's also like just coming to grasp with finding someone who's willing to look past what's happening to you and still be with you, and then slowly losing your mind and having no control of it. You become the pinnacle of what you didn't know you needed, and then watching your mind slowly disappear. Oh, I think that's one of the most... Just recently, I learned about the different types of horror of, like, oh, men find this horror thing to be horrifying. Women find this horror thing to... POC find this thing to be horrible. So, like, for me, losing control of your own sense of self and who you are is just astounding.
Hi, editing Charlie here. That's a big part of the reason behind doing this show is I really want to dig into what it is that makes a given movie disturbing, and to who and why. We all have those different thresholds for what bothers us, and I want to get a better understanding of what the reasons are behind those. I think if you find someone who's bothered by a particular movie in the same way that you are, it's fun to pull on that thread and try to figure out what you might have in common with that person that you didn't know before. It's not always fun, because a lot of times the answer is trauma, but it is usually interesting. All right, sorry for interrupting.
I've heard of the movie The Fly, but I've never seen it. Having the movie put that in such a way, I think really hit me hard.
Yeah, definitely. And do you think, because a lot of what you're describing sounds like empathy, it sounds like you have more empathy for Seth as a character than you do for Jack in The Shining. And I imagine a lot of that is because Seth is like a nice person. and Jack in The Shining does seem like he was already kind of an asshole to start with, which is one of the problems that I have with that movie as opposed to the book, is that you start out with Jack Nicholson, who's already at like mid-evil, and then you just raise him to like high evil by being haunted by the hotel. But, you know, with Seth, you start out with somebody who is a little weird and kooky, but seems like a really nice guy who's just trying to do science and maybe get a girlfriend. So I think that and like the autism just making him a really relatable character. And then one of the things you said was he got somebody who cares about him. You know, he got into a good relationship and then his whole life fell apart. So he didn't really have any time to enjoy that, which is kind of tragic in its own way.
Oh, 100%. Because I think that's a lot of people's stories nowadays. It's like, oh, I finally got to a point where, like the one story of like my wife got cancer. We did everything right. We saved for a 401k. We did stocks. We got a house, a family, and all that was gone within like 3 months. And he's like, I hate the fucking system.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's one of the things that's really big for me with this movie is that it was just a really quick, bad decision that took maybe 5 minutes from when he thought of it to when he did it. And that ruined the rest of his life just by that. After that point, there was nothing he could have done.
Oh, absolutely nothing.
He was just fucked.
So, in your opinion, do you think empathy plays a big role for you, or just a lot of people in general, into what makes a good movie?
I don't know. A lot of people don't necessarily want that experience with the movies that they watch. Like, they don't want to watch movies because they relate to the characters in them. Having empathy with the characters in your movie requires a level of emotional involvement that not everybody necessarily wants. And like I don't want that from 100% of the movies I watch. Sometimes I just want to watch something because it's dumb or it's funny. I watched Basketball the other night, not because I find any of the characters relatable or I feel empathy for any of them, but just because it's a really fun dumb movie.
Basketball? What is that?
Yeah. Okay. Have you seen the movie Airplane?
Don't the like tie these snakes on these motherfucking plane?
No, that's snakes on a plane.
Oh, is that the one where it's like a purple airplane or whatever, and like Snoop Dogg?
No, that might be Soul Plane.
Oh, Soul Plane. Okay.
Airplane is another movie from the 70s. It's just like a very silly kind of parody comedy.
Oh, where he's like, "Of course I'm sure. Don't call me Shirley."
There we go.
Okay, yeah.
There we go. Airplane. Yeah. So that movie, one of the guys who directed that movie made a movie starring the two guys who make South Park. And it's as dumb as it sounds from that description.
Yeah, that sounds
where
phenomenal.
they play these like two losers who create a sport, and it becomes like a national phenomena. It's a really dumb fucking movie. I made my husband watch it. He giggled a lot. It was great.
Yeah.
But like sometimes I just want to watch a movie like that. I don't always want to feel empathy when I'm going to the movies.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No.
I don't think anybody makes that movie with the intention of like, ooh, I want to make the audience really feel empathetic for these two dumbass characters that I just put into this movie.
Oh, okay. So it just depends on the style of movie then.
Yeah, it depends on the movie they're making. I don't know. I think you approach every movie differently, probably.
Gotcha. Yeah.
There is a sequel to this movie. I do not recommend watching it.
Oh.
It's not good.
Is it like Baraska Part 5?
Yeah, kinda. It's pretty bad. Basically,
Damn.
This is the almost human son of Brundlefly searches for a cure to his mutated
What?
genes while being monitored by a nefarious corporation that wishes to continue his father's experiments.
What the fuck?
It was directed by the guy who did the special effects in this movie. It doesn't star any of the same people, except maybe Stathis. But yeah, it's not a good movie. I don't recommend it at all.
I like your recommendations, especially with that monkey movie
That monkey movie. Congo?
that your fiance really likes.
Congo? We watched Congo?
Yeah, Congo.
My husband
yeah.
likes any movie with monkeys in it.
Back to Cronenberg's movie.
What about it?
The light bulb goes off in his head, and it's like talking after that. He determines the computer isn't so much moving a thing just from that. It's like, yeah, I get it, but I also don't get it as well. Even now today with AI, you have to specifically say what you want it to do, or else it'll guess. And it's always the intent behind it. Like, how are you going to tell a machine exactly what you want without like putting your brain together and it going off of the impulses in your head and your brain that things make? So it's never going to truly be perfect.
Like, yes, I have questions about this technology and the science involved. I do think it would have been a worse movie if they had tried to explain all that. Like, I'm not faulting the movie itself for not trying to explain to me science that I'm fundamentally not educated enough to understand in the first place. I do think it's a better movie for keeping it vague. It's enormously complicated, and I don't know enough about how computers work to understand what it would take to program that into a computer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, computing definitely a fickle thing.
I also don't know, what is it scanning to figure out what the DNA is of everything?
Yeah, it doesn't.
If I gotta prick my goddamn finger to figure out my blood sugar, how the hell is he non-invasively getting his DNA and the DNA of a fly into a computer in 1986?
And how did the computer know that it was fly DNA? Because it's never teleported a fly before. Because later on the screen, like, what was the second object? They said a fly. It's like, how does the computer know that?
Yeah, like you just programmed every possible sequence of DNA into the computer so that it can pick that one out. Is there some kind of database somewhere that you're pulling from with the internet that you don't have in 1986?
Yeah, like how Seth just is. He figures it out. He fixed the programming, as he says. He just orders another monkey. Which, that's one of the things I like about the movie as well. It doesn't waste time in being like, oh, we gotta wait for a monkey. We gotta wait for this. It just happens. So that's the important part. And then
we just cut to whenever the monkey gets there. That's the important part.
It gets teleported, and happy deepy dappa doo. The music is playing. The violins are stringing, and it's nice.
Everyone's happy. Let's get Chinese food.
Yeah. Afterwards, the whole celebration. I think the time between, he might have been running more tests, whatever, but it takes like a few weeks or months even to make a mock-up. because there's a cover story mock-up that gets sent to them, and you were talking about how Seth feels jealous and insecure.
Yeah.
But I don't really see that. I think they had spent so much time together already that, because I think I'm the same way. If there's a pattern that happens of her constantly there and then trying stuff and all of a sudden she needs to go, it's like a break in that pattern definitely causes some instability, but not to the point of jealousness and insecure, in my opinion.
Well, he does make a comment, I think, when she's leaving or right after she leaves, where he's like, oh, she's running off to see someone's boyfriend. Like, of course she is.
Oh, I had forgotten about that.
Yeah, so like he's at least somewhat aware of the relationship that she has or had with Stathis.
Yeah, because she had to have told him at that point, because they were already spending so much time together.
So for me, it's like, oh, we've been spending all this time together. We finally got this thing done that we've been wanting to do. And instead of spending time celebrating with me, she immediately runs off to talk to her boss / ex-boyfriend who's planning on doing a story about me. And like, I could definitely see that being something that would make him really jealous and insecure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Especially if, like you were talking about earlier, playing into the fragile ego of men. Yeah. He's like, you know what? I'll become even better than him. I'll become the best. You know what? I'll just do it myself. I'll show them. And then...
Exactly. I'll show them. Yeah. Which is so short-sighted because, like, his whole plan was, oh, she's going to write this book. It's going to end with me teleporting myself across the room. So, like, the minute she leaves and I'm mad at her, I'm just going to do the whole thing without her so she misses it. Like, that's some petty bullshit right there.
And yeah, you could argue as well, like, oh, she's there to record it and get his thoughts and feelings on the matter of what's happening and stuff like that. But it's also you two are practically dating without saying you're dating or together in a relationship.
You don't know. They might have said it.
They might have said it, yeah, but it's never
We didn't
fully.
see it happen. Yeah.
I mean, with a movie like this where it's like compressed and stuff like that, you probably figure that out on your own. But most people need a confirmation.
I don't know, man. Have you ever sat down with anybody and had a conversation about where your relationship is going that you would find entertaining enough to put in a movie?
I see your point. Unless it ends in like a jealous / angry conversation, then no, because people love drama.
But like, I've had one of those conversations recently.
Oh, God.
They're not fun or interesting to anybody else.
I mean, they're fun and interesting to people who love drama. And there's a lot of people that like that.
Not if they're not dramatic. Sometimes it's just awkward.
You're like, so what are we?
Mm-hmm. What are we doing? Where is this going? How do you want to communicate?
Yeah.
You know, I'm not saying it's bad. It's just not terribly interesting to anybody who's not involved in the situation. So I don't know. I feel like they were probably somewhat, like they were at least exclusively dating. I don't know if they ever declared labels or anything.
Oh, yeah. Definitely not labels. But she does come back after he's done it and he's told her. One of the scenes that was very... not difficult for me to watch, but it was like, how could you do that? Is like when Veronica comes back after Seth calls her and like he shows her like, hey, this is how I eat. And it's like she still hugs him. And it's like, because you say she's witnessing the disintegration of someone she loves. Mm-hmm. Maybe, but like at that point, to me, it'd be way too much because it's like, you look disgusting. Sorry to say, but like that is off the wall.
I mean, yeah, that's the whole point, is that what he's doing is horrifying and disgusting, but she loves him and she's as concerned for him as she is scared. And I think that's kind of where the illness allegory comes into it, is that like, you know, if you were with somebody who was dealing with some kind of terminal illness and maybe they have to eat with a feeding tube, or maybe they have a colostomy bag, or maybe
interesting, yeah,
they have a hole in their throat, or like something that's going on with them that at first glance might be like, ew, that's really gross, or that's weird, or that makes me uncomfortable. But when it's somebody that you love and you care about and you're worried for them and your only concern is like, are they okay? How long are they going to survive? How much more time do I have with them? How can I help them get better? What can I do to support them? You kind of learn to ignore that, or you get used to it.
Oh, yeah. I hadn't even made that connection, because to me, that makes sense. It's like, oh, yeah, humans have empathy. I have empathy for you, for what you're going through. It's like, I don't care if you're shitting in the bag or shit yourself. Like, I'll clean you up because I love you.
Yeah, exactly.
But just physical turning and stuff like that, I think that is what got me. Because at that point, I'm just like, I wouldn't turn away and like leave you, but I'd be like, I can't touch you right now. If you're literally turning into a fly.
Yeah, and I mean that's a very real thing that people deal with. I remember when I was really little, probably like between 6 and 8, my great grandpa was dying of skin cancer in the hospital. And I went to see him one time and I was like, I can't do this. Like this does not look like the man that I know in my life. He looks small and kind of scary. And he looks to me kind of like he's already dead. And so I can't do this. And I made that decision for myself as a child. But, you know, even as an adult, that's kind of something you have to confront if you love somebody who's going through something like that. If they're dealing with some kind of illness or injury, that their body might be different. They might look sick. They might look incomplete. They might look upsetting in some kind of way. And to what extent do you ignore that? And how much of that is a conscious decision that you have to make?
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%.
And like, I love this person, so I just have to push through it. And there's got to be, I assume, some level of guilt on her part of like, my instinct is to feel repulsed by this thing that's happening, or like by what's happening to you or what you're doing. But I don't want to feel that because I love you and I care about you and I just want to help and I want to be here for you.
Oh yeah, I guess the love does trump the grossness factor.
Hopefully. I mean, you hear all the time about the statistics of, you know, men who divorce their wives when they get diagnosed with cancer and things like that. So, like, obviously, not everybody is willing to stay with you through things like that. But you would hope that your partner would be able to fight through that and feel more empathy for you.
Hope. They fucking better. No, I'm kidding.
That's what the vows are all about, damn it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what did you think about the lovely pregnancy dream?
I honestly thought it was happening in real time. Like they did a good thing of that. And then
it was a good fake out.
I was expecting multiple eggs to fall out. Like,
sure.
Because as the doctor was like, wait, I feel something. I was expecting like a handful of eggs to come out and just like start coming out of her. And that would have been even grosser. But with a whole worm, I was like, oh my God.
One time when I was in high school, I think, there was this huge fucking fly that was buzzing around my house and irritating me. And I ended up smashing it with a book. And when I did, there were like all these little baby maggots that came out of it. And it was the most disgusting thing that has ever happened to me in my entire life. And I am traumatized by it to this day. And so that is what I think about, is like how many more of them are in there? Is it just that one? Or is she like full of these things somehow?
Oh, just constantly coming out. I mean, but at that point, Seth would have to constantly keep on impregnating her.
Which seemed like what he wanted to do anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole thing was so gross. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess we can talk about the whole abortion thing.
Okay. Yeah. Always happy to talk about abortion.
Okay. So, like, I'm for abortion because, like, it's your choice, your body, your choice, and stuff like that. And some people have an issue with it, but it's like, no. I'm all for Veronica getting an abortion. In my head, I was like, is it literally a half human, half fly right now? Because if I was a woman, I would not want that shit coming out of me formed. Yeah. So And then the doctor being like, well, that doctor asked too many fucking questions, man. Your friend called in a favor. You're like, well, why? Well, why? You need to shut up and do the favor, and then you don't ever have to do a favor for him again.
But I think my thing is, if you're somebody who's capable of getting pregnant, which I know you haven't had that experience in your life, there's a lot of fear that goes into that idea that your body can just like create this whole thing without your permission, and suddenly that thing has more rights than you do. And that's a really scary experience to be in. But then in real life, not necessarily a literal fly monster or anything,
right,
but some percentage of women who are looking for abortions who were either sexually assaulted, which resulted in them getting pregnant, or who are just pregnant by a partner that they would prefer not to make a copy of for one reason or another. And so there is that fear with someone in that situation where it's like, I don't want this. I don't want this particular creature that's growing inside me. I don't want that genetic connection with me and this horrible thing or this horrible person that has happened to me. And I really see the fly baby as an extension of that, taking it to the most extreme possible degree, not just a human baby with a father who is a bad person, but a literal part monster that your body is going to produce. And just immediately being like, no, get this thing out of me.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine the horror. People have said having a baby is like having a parasite because it does suck the nutrients away from you, so that's why you have to eat more and take prenatal vitamins and stuff like that. And it's like, in this aspect, it is a true literal parasite that you might be giving birth to. So I can only imagine the horror. So.
And that's the thing, is like, she doesn't know for sure. And the doctor's like, oh, we should do some tests. And she's like, no, I don't want to do tests. Like, nope, I don't know what kind of time I have. Like, I don't know how quickly fly babies form. I don't know how quickly this could potentially need to come out of my body on its own. I'm just going to nip it in the bud, get this done with right now. And even on the level of just, I've got other shit going on in my life right now. My partner is dying. Something weird is happening. I don't understand. I don't have time to worry about, oh, I'm also pregnant. Like, even if it weren't a fly baby, this would be a really inconvenient time in her life to be having a baby.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
But I was saying about sexual assault stuff is that most people, even if they're fairly anti-abortion, are willing to make exceptions in cases of rape and or incest. So I don't think, if this were the real world, that anybody would have huge objections to Veronica having an abortion in this specific situation. Obviously, you don't want to explain that whole thing to the doctor because then he just thinks you're nuts because you're talking about things that can't possibly happen. But I think maybe that's the reason why we're able to talk about abortion in a movie like this, is because it's in such a fantastical situation that this isn't actually something that could happen. And one of the things that I heard Cronenberg say in an interview was that he wanted to make a movie about aging and illness and disability, but you can't really do that straightforwardly in a movie. You have to kind of dress it up in a sci-fi sort of way. And maybe that's also what's happening with the abortion topic, is that you can't just straightforwardly talk about, oh, this woman's going to get an abortion in your mainstream horror movie. You have to make it a situation where, like, oh, she's getting an abortion because she might be impregnated with a fly monster. Here, let's talk about that and figure out how to discuss that in a way that doesn't get us immediately shot down by all of the groups that like to protest movies.
Oh yeah, I mean, which everyone will agree. Oh, fly monster, yeah.
Like, yeah, we're not doing that here. Let's not.
Yeah. So the doctor asking all those questions really pissed me off. Please stop talking and do the thing. You're there
to do your job. Please just do your job and stop asking me questions. I've decided I want this. End of discussion. It's my body. Just do the thing, please. Nobody questions when you want other medical procedures done the way they do when you want something done with your reproductive organs.
Ain't that the fucking truth?
Fuck off. You could get a vasectomy tomorrow if you wanted.
Yeah, no, I'm agreeing with you.
And nobody would question you. It's not your reproductive organs that people are trying to regulate.
Yes. I know that. Sorry, right now I feel like I just said something wrong. I was like...
No, you're good.
But no, I'm agreeing with the whole, like, yeah.
I'll let you off the hook. We can change the subject back to video games.
What?
And since you said that this felt like a video game, are there any particular games that you feel like you've gotten the same kind of feeling from? I don't play a lot of games.
Yes, so for gameplay wise and just the fun, the one that left me like that was like Luigi's Mansion.
Okay.
And the one that left me like...
You're going to have to explain that, buddy.
Oh, Luigi's Mansion?
Yeah.
I finished the game, like, I want to keep on playing it, but I already know where everything is and what to do. So I'm at a loss for words and just stuck because this was such a fantastic game for me that I was like, I want more new things from it.
So you feel like that's a game that you wish you could kind of wipe your memory and play again for the first time?
Oh, 100%. Luigi's Mansion. Yeah. And...
Okay.
The one that left me, the one that was like emotional for me, it was Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. I don't know why, but for some reason, anytime a game or movie has someone down on their luck and people are supporting that character, I fucking love it.
The video games that you listed were not what I was expecting. I was expecting bigger, more story-based kind of games.
Also, one of my favorite games that gets me emotional is Horizon Zero Dawn.
Okay, that one I've heard of.
That one?
That's the one with the big dinosaur robots.
Yeah. Oh, just just phenomenal.
I think the way that I approach video games is I have two kinds of games that I want to play. I either want something that is just like absolutely a sandbox that I can play and do whatever I want, which is, what I get out of Animal Crossing. And with the way that I play Don't Starve together is with enough like mods that I can just play it as a sandbox game and I don't have to worry about dying all the time. That's the only way that it's fun for me. I just want to craft and like design.
Yeah.
But I want either a sandbox or I want something that's the total opposite of that. I want to be completely on rails. I like a Telltale game, I played through the Walking Dead games, and that was a lot of fun. Or, what the fuck was the name of that game? What Remains of Edith Finch.
Oh.
And then there's games like Gone Home or Last Days of June. And those are games where, like, you're walking around in a space, looking at things and finding clues to try to piece together some kind of a story, ultimately.
Oh.
That kind of thing I really love. And those are really good story-based games. Not necessarily a lot of replayability in that because you've already solved the mystery. So those are definitely ones where you finished it and you're like, well, fuck, what do I do now? This story bummed me out. I've got all these emotions now that I don't know what to do with. So what do we take away from The Fly? That the real horror isn't in the transformation, it's how easy it is to lose yourself in the pursuit of perfection. Seth wanted to transcend the limitations of the human body and instead discovered the limits of humanity itself. It's a story about love, science, ego, decay, and the terrifying beauty of having a body that will fail you someday. Also, don't drink and teleport. One of the things that I like to try to do here is to rate our movies on 3 topics. We've got overall quality, how uncomfortable it is, and would you rewatch it or recommend it to somebody else? So what would you say as far as overall quality?
I am both a sucker for practical effects and CGI when it's done well.
Sure.
So like that's why I enjoy both the 2011 thing and the older version.
Mm-hmm.
But the overall quality of The Fly is really good. And it still holds up even now in 2026. I wouldn't give it a 10 out of 10. I'd give it like a 9.5.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like I'd give this movie at least an 8 out of 10. It's really well made and it's really effective. So as far as discomfort goes, how would you rate this one?
I would give it like a 4 or 5 for sure.
Yeah, I'm definitely at a 5 out of 10. I think if you're not eating while you're trying to watch this movie, you're mostly fine watching it. At times you might be distracted by how cool the special effects are that you kind of forget that you're watching somebody suffering. And because so much of it is subtext and allegory, it kind of goes under the radar and you don't necessarily think about kind of the deeper meanings behind things until after the movie's over and you're kind of sitting with it. And what about rewatching it or recommending it to somebody?
Oh, 100% I'd rewatch it.
Yeah.
I'd recommend it to anyone who's like, oh, like, do you know what kind of horror you like? No? Let's try The Fly. Oh, let's try The Thing. Oh, let's try 13 Ghosts. So dip your toes into the different pools and see which one you like.
Yeah, 10 out of 10 for me as far as rewatching it or recommending it. I think everybody should see this movie. If somebody suggested it, I cannot think of a single time when I would turn it down and be like, no, I don't really want to watch that movie. It's a great movie on the surface, and I think it's even better below it. One of the other things I like to do here is antidotes. So if our listeners need a little palate cleanser after this movie, what would you recommend? Something with the same kind of science experiment goes wrong energy, but with maybe less body fluids. The one I kept thinking about was Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. I'm going to go in hard on that one. Have you seen Honey, I Shrunk the Kids?
Oh, yeah. Like twice.
Okay, good. So you've got an eccentric scientist who accidentally causes body transformation with his invention in his own home. But in this case, it's with his children and his neighbor's children. And in the end, he is able to reverse it. But it also has those really amazing practical effects that stand up even today. Just a much happier ending. But you do still get some giant insects if you're into that kind of thing.
Yeah, that one I'm not a fan of is the giant insects. It's just like, ooh. Especially the ant, when it comes along, I'm just like, just get out of my face.
Yeah, fuck off. I don't need a giant ant. There's also Flubber. If you want that, it's a mad scientist's invention, gets out of hand, causes problems in his romantic relationship. You get a silly, bouncy CGI substance instead of buckets of bodily fluids, so that's always fun.
Yeah, that one's definitely a very feel good because
Yeah.
it embodies the meaning of the word cute, in my opinion.
It is a very cute movie. Finally, I would say if you like slime but you want to laugh about it, I would recommend Ghostbusters 2. We don't have to have the argument about why I think it's better of the two films, but you can just watch it and enjoy it. It's a good time. Okay. Well, thank you for stopping by.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm sure I'll have you back at some point. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Cinematic Discomfort. Thanks to our special guest Antonio for coming in and giving us another viewpoint on this movie. Special thanks to Travis Woods, whose Cinephilia Beyond article, Does This Look Like a Sick Man to You? The Horror of Identity and the Identity of Horror in David Cronenberg's The Fly, had some incredible writing that I felt like I had to include, and additional thanks to one of my favorite people, Forrest Wilbur, for lending their voice to those words so I didn't feel like I was just plagiarizing. If you've got more thoughts about today's film that you want to share with us, or you want to speculate about at what point Seth Brundle stops being hot, please reach out to us on social media. We're on Instagram as @CinematicDiscomfortPod, and you can find me directly at Charlie Danny Perry. That's Charlie with an IE, Danny with an I, and Perry with a Y. And if you want more conversations about films that disturb, unsettle, and stay with us long after the credits roll, make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to support the show, the best way to do that is to share it with a weird friend. You can also rate us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening, and leave us a review. Until next time, take care of yourselves and maybe invest in a bug zapper.